Welcome to the Amazing Mindset chat room and an interview I did back in May of 2025 with performance coach Graeme Hinde. Graeme is a hugely influential and highly respected voice in the UK fitness industry. And you'll hear in this interview that he is a truly inspirational speaker too. Hence the title of the podcast, Inspiring Confidence, Connection and Community. I first came across Graeme through a lady called Lynn Briggs, who runs a company called MH1, focusing on mental health support in the health and fitness sector, as well as in the workplace. It's now called MH1 Global. But it was Graeme who actually founded this MH1 idea. So I thought a great place to start our chat.
MH1, okay. In the early stages of the very first lockdown, as you've described, my background's in the health fitness sector, and I remember when we were sort of permitted to go out for a walk. Well, I was out for a walk, and I saw somebody I knew, Jed, who was worked in the health and fitness sector, and she taught group exercise classes. And we had a 2 meters apart discussion, and it became very apparent that she was not in a good place because a lot of group exercise instructors are freelance, and suddenly she had no source of income, and she had to put food on the table for her kids. Single mum, all of that. And she actually got quite emotional, and my, immediate reaction would have been to give her a hug, but I couldn't, we weren't allowed to. So I left, after a while, we sort of told her everything would be okay, and, maybe to start looking at other things to fill the gap, because we didn't know how long the lockdowns would last. So, but I came away from there and I thought there must be a lot of people like that, because as I've said, a lot of group exercise teachers and others are self-employed and freelance. They don't have a contract. So I came up with the idea of MH1, which would be a community predominantly for people that worked in health and fitness who were not in a good place, not in a great place at the time. I went to a company called Matrix who supply gyms across the world with treadmills and all of that kind of thing. And I said to the commercial director, would you be willing to support something that supports the workforce in our sector? And he said, we'd love to. And so we set up MH1. We created a mental health questionnaire, which is still available today, which is great for new members in gyms. They can talk about how they feel. It used to be just about, your physical health. Now there's an option to discuss mental health. So there's a really good legacy from the original purpose of MH1.
So MH1, and as I said, it's now MH1 Global, and going from strength to strength with Lynn Briggs at the helm. I'm hoping to interview Lynn very soon here in the chat room. I then suggested to Graeme that before COVID and before MH1, he was actually already aware of the importance of the mental health side of the fitness industry, because Graeme had already put together in 2018 a conference related to this very subject. Could he tell us a little bit about that conference?
So in 2018, this is quite a remarkable story. I was in a gym, and I noticed that there was a group of people, and the center of attention was a young lady in a wheelchair. And I talked to everybody. So I went over to her and I asked her, what is it about the gym? You seem really happy, you seem really popular. What is it about the gym that you make the effort to get here? She said, well, I had mental health issues, tried to take my own life, failed, and broke my spine. And you can imagine I was in complete and utter shock. So I learned from her the benefits, not just of physical activity, but the benefits of the community that you're part of when you go to the gym or you go to a class or you're a member of a walking group or a running group or all sorts of different groups, So I thought to myself, this is big, this is big, and we in the fitness sector have a role to play. We probably just didn't realize it at the time because I'll be honest, I think it's only recently, certainly midway through the pandemic, when people started to realize that there was a lot of isolation and gyms were closed and people were feeling the effects of that. And so I realized that there were, and of course, this was back before the pandemic, but I realized the importance of physical activity and our role within mental health, if you like. I don't think, the best way I can describe it is if you pluck up the courage or make the effort to go to the gym, you might have lots of voices in your head saying, I'm not in the mood, it's too cold, I can't be bothered. But everybody that does a workout always says, I'm glad I did that. And they're glad because they feel good. It's lifted their spirits, their confidence, whatever. It's really important to, I always do it now, if my partner says to me, I'm not in the mood to go to the gym, I always say to her, but think how you felt last time you went. And she says, yeah, you are right, And she goes and then she feels great. So, yeah, I think that event was probably a little bit ahead of its time in some ways, but our guest speakers had a clinician, I had all sorts of people there as guest speakers talking about the role of the fitness industry and in mental well-being, and it was a real success.
I then asked Graeme if the attitude to and the emphasis on the mental health side of health and fitness was, at this time, very much secondary to the physical side of the industry.
Definitely secondary, yes. And I'll give you an example, Jed. At the beginning of the event, whenever you join a gym, you fill in something called a PAR-Q, a pre-activity readiness questionnaire, and it's all physical. It's all about physical things. So I asked the audience, about 80 people there, and I asked them if they had an equivalent for mental health. So you can check and measure, when somebody's joined. And they all said no. Nobody had one. After all these speakers, all these guests, great content, moving stories, I asked them at the end, would you now implement a questionnaire for mental health? And nobody would. And the reason they wouldn't is they were scared because they didn't know. Well, if somebody says, yeah, I'm suffering from depression, what do you do? What do you do? And so I think it was then and subsequently the pandemic that our industry, the one I'm in, really started to look at mental health and think, yeah, this is quite significant. Our role is significant. And now memberships are being, forgive me, but memberships are being sold as much on the mental well-being effects of working out as the physical appearance effects of working out.
That's really good to hear. Now, Graeme describes himself as a performance coach. So I asked him if he could just elaborate on the meaning of this title.
I describe myself as a performance coach because I think I'd be misleading people if I said I was a business coach, because although I've had a few businesses. That's not what it's about. I call it performance because I work on people's individual confidence. Um, I'll give you an example of somebody who she's very good at what she does, very well respected, but didn't have a voice. She didn't have the confidence to, with the senior management team, to tell them how she felt or tell them why she'd implemented a certain thing. And my job we both agreed, was to help her find a voice. And that came through working on her talents, what she's really good at, and then asking her, so why are you not confident? Because you're really good at what you do. And I think, virtually everybody that I work with, I'd like to think, comes away feeling more confident in themselves because they understand their abilities more, and they understand, because quite often, I'm sure you'd agree, Jed, not many people are told at work how much they're admired and respected, and how much gratitude there is for their work. So when they're told that they're great and that they're doing some great stuff, a lot of people get quite emotional because they've never been told that before. And so I tend to use, don't get me wrong, I'm not all, fluffy and nice. Some people need to be challenged. But I'm very much into, the number one thing for me is to build somebody's confidence, because when you have confidence, you can do anything, in my humble opinion.
Graeme could very easily describe himself as a confidence coach. Inspiring confidence is so powerful because without confidence, as Graeme says, we can't do very much. So I asked Graeme to tell us who inspired him and gave him the confidence and the self-confidence that he now has, and he passes on or tries to pass on to others.
So I was very lucky that I think one of the most important things with confidence, whether it's your team members at work or as a kid, are the words that are used to describe you. And I was very lucky that my mum was very well educated. She was a grafter. She usually had 2 jobs. And the words she would use with me would be things like, oh, you're cheeky, or oh, you should be on stage, or you should be on television. And if you're being told that, and her friends are saying similar things, how can you not be confident? How can you not think, yeah, I'm pretty cool, me? Really impacted. It was only as an adult I started to realise that, so people will say to me, because I host events and I've got guest speakers, a bit like a chat show on TV, but it's all related to the industry I'm in. And somebody said to me, I was in Birmingham the other day, and somebody was at this same event and said to me, I just love the way you ask questions. Where did you learn that? And I thought, I don't know. I just must have picked it up along the way, from listening to my mum and other people. And then similarly, when I was at high school, I had to wear calipers on my legs. So from the age of 11 to 15, I was, unable to do PE or anything like that. And I was very, very fortunate that my form tutor was also the head of PE. And he was amazing. And it's only again, as an adult, I look back and think, that's why he did that. And that's what I've picked up from Paul. And he would have me, for example, he would sit and ask my opinion on, my pals would be playing football in PE. And he'd say to me, do you think he's good on the left, or would you have him up front? And he wanted my opinion. And of course, then he'd get me to make notes about, and he was keeping me busy, Jed, he was keeping me occupied. But I learned so much about watching and observing people's behaviour and, all sorts of things, and how people felt after coming last in cross country, for example. Go and have a word with Steve and ask him how he feels. Make sure he's all right. That kind of thing, which it's incredible because you absorb that leadership, that example that he was setting to me twice a week. I was, when I look at it now, I think if I'd asked him to coach me to become a coach, it would have cost me thousands. He was that good, just amazing. So those two, my mum and Paul McEwen, rest in peace, fabulous man, really shaped my confidence and my self-belief, and to be able to help other people as well.
So, an incredible mum. And then this incredible teacher, Paul McEwen, who kind of introduced Graeme to being heard and to being valued, being respected, and something that Graeme's opinion was worth. He was connecting with Graeme, and through that connection, he instigated a shift in Graeme's self-confidence. Hats off to him, because that's exactly what Graeme does now. Now, Graeme, you mentioned in a previous little chat we had that the fitness industry seems to be taking some sort of a move or a shift more towards community these days.
I think community is a really important word in life, really. You look at, I know you and I have touched on this between ourselves, Jed, is the Blue Zone thing, which is the documentary that was done all about these particular places in the world where, there was one, I remember a guy who was still riding horses on a ranch. He was about 93. And it was because of the community that he was part of and all the evidence that the most important thing for longevity is community, a sense of belonging. And then, of course, comes the purpose, your role in that community. So community, whether it's a walking group, there's a woman set up a group near where I live, a jogging sort of running group. And within a month, she had 350 members. So that tells me, most people would, I think, oh, there must be a lot of keen runners where you live. No, there's a lot of people that want to be part of something. They want to feel a sense of community. And actually, the running bit's an added benefit to their health. But I genuinely believe, I think I told you this story, Jen, it's funny in terms of community, but my mum taught group exercise till she was 80. And sadly, she passed away when she was 81. And I bumped into a couple of ladies who would used to go to her classes. And they were saying, you're Angie's son, aren't you? Oh, we do miss you, Mum, we miss her classes. And I'm saying, oh, thank you, ladies, thank you. That's lovely of you to say. And thank you for coming over. But Graeme, there is one thing. We never did anything, at your mum's classes. I said, what do you mean? They said, well, we just used to take cakes in and we'd have a brew and sometimes someone would do sandwiches. I said, well, my mum used to leave the house with all this fitness gear on. Oh, no. Well, when she got older, it just became easier just for us to have a coffee and a chat. So I said, how many of you? Oh, 25, 30. Because that was their community, Jed. That was their thing. The fact my mum had conned me for years to believing they were, doing workouts is another thing. But I thought it was lovely that even though none of us are as active and really want to be dancing around to music, we'll do that for 10 minutes, but the rest of the time will be a community. And I think that's that is the power of physical activity, is it does bring people together. Quite often, becoming part of a community is where your confidence matters. I always say, people that one of the most daunting things you can do in a gym or health club or leisure centre is open the studio doors for the very first time. So you booked in a class, you've never done it before, there's a bit of choreography involved, and you have this perception that everybody in that room will look like they've just competed at the Olympic Games. And so the fear of opening that door, but once you do and you step over the threshold and you become part of that community, because usually the coaches, etc., are brilliant at that, brilliant at making people part of it. So, community is huge. It's very important because it really is proven to extend life. And so it can't be ignored.
Wow, the wonders of classes and groups. I love the story of his mum's fitness group. The sense of belonging is huge, isn't it? And now this business of walking through the door, such a massive step for those who don't feel particularly comfortable joining a group or joining a gym. So how do you get people to walk through that door? What's the secret behind that?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm a great believer that our role in the health and fitness world is to, especially with beginners, is to hold their hand. Try and remember that I always say this whenever I'm talking to fitness professionals, we're the weird ones. Only 15% of the population are gym members. So a whopping 85% aren't, and probably think we're boring and we're self-obsessed and blah, 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 And we need to prove that we care. So if somebody walks into a leisure centre, for example, Jed, and you can usually, if you've got any sense, you can pick up how they feel. You can pick up, they might be a little bit short with the receptionist. They might be a little bit, visibly nervous. And so it's important to make them feel that actually, firstly, us fitness people aren't weird. We're quite nice. And that I always remember I interviewed a woman called Jean in St. Helens, and she told me this story, and it was so powerful. It was so powerful that I say I interviewed her. I was talking to her, I got introduced to her, and subsequently I asked her if I could interview her on video, because Jean tells the story, and I'll tell it really quickly. She was 20 stone. She'd gone through a divorce. She had no self-confidence. She was delighted that just a few miles away in Wigan, there was a 24-hour Asda. So she used to go shopping at 1 a.m. so that nobody would see her, because in her eyes, she was huge. And so she decided after a while, when she was sort of emotionally a bit better and started to look at herself, and decided to join a gym at the local leisure centre. And she sat in a car in the car park crying because she watched people walking in, and in her eyes, they were all slim, they were all fit, and she wouldn't fit in. And it's powerful. Just as somebody that's not in that situation, you have to really listen to how she feels. And so I did the video, and what became apparent was that she went in eventually. After the third visit, she plucked up the courage, her words, I plucked up the courage to walk through the front doors. I was sweating profusely. I was almost in a fog. I just, and I said I'd like to see the gym. She said, and I didn't have a clue what a gym looked like. Um, and this guy took me in, and she said, and the first thing I thought was, I'm going to break that equipment if I get on it because I'm so big. All these terribly negative thoughts going through her head. But understandable, because people have a perception of things, don't they? So in her eyes, she didn't fit in there. Thankfully, the guy that showed around said to her, "You're scared, aren't you, Jean?" And she said, "I'm terrified." She said, and he said, "Well, look, normally what I'd ask you to do is book an induction, which is our way of showing you around. But I'd like you to book it with me, and I'll meet you at reception, and I'll take." And that to me was a perfect example of how we need to care for people who cross the threshold, because it takes a lot of confidence or courage to do that. And the consequences of Jean doing what she did was, I've been to New York with my sister for a break. She said I used to not want to get on a plane because I'd need 2 seats, and all this kind of stuff, awful things going through her head. And yeah, but because she was well looked after and cared for by somebody that sensed how she was feeling, it was a great success for her. And that's how we need to be. We need to treat every individual as being unique.
Incredible. What a story. The impact of this story is just immense. This trainer in the gym, he makes a connection by asking her a question. She has to respond, and so she's heard. And when he reacts to her response, she's now valued. And from feeling valued, she feels a shift in confidence and can now, in time, be welcomed to the gym community. And this story, so powerful as it is, ended our audio podcast episode. But Graeme and I did actually continue our chat to discuss in brief the subject of GLP-1s, Mounjaro, or skinny jabs, as some call them, which were just coming into the market in the UK.
And today we had a meeting on Teams. He approached me because of my network. He said, "How do you feel about co-hosting an event on GLP-1s and our role?" And so today we had a meeting with another guy as well called Harry Macmillan, who's his company provide all the kinds of wraparound services, lifestyle stuff that people using those medications probably should adhere to. But what was interesting was I'm a traditional fitness person, so I have to. I'm not against GLP-1s, pardon me, for the right people. But I started to think, Jed, just along the lines of what you're saying, who am I? I can't put weight on. My metabolism is annoyingly quick. And I'm not being big-headed or anything. It's quite annoying at times, because I can't, if I go to the gym, I eat loads and good healthy stuff, but I can't put weight on. So how can I ever judge anybody that can't get weight off, who decides to go down this route? I can't. I'm not. But what I can do is listen.
Yeah. This conference or seminar did actually take place in Bolton in May of 2025. And it was through this meeting that I discovered Dr. Hussein Al-Zubaidi, who spoke at the meeting. You can find my chat with Hussein here on my YouTube channel or on my Amazing Mindset podcasts on Apple and Spotify and Buzzsprout. My sincere thanks to Graeme. Confidence, connection, community, being heard, being valued, feeling heard, feeling valued, feeling like you belong. It's wonderful. And I'm really hoping that we'll have a podcast very soon with a debate on the GLP-1 drugs, as so many people are using them these days, and maybe invite Graeme and Hussein. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you very soon.